back. It is the Force with Friends podcast. My name is Will with the Padawan Pops YouTube channel. This is my friend and co-host Kevin. How's it going?
I'm good. Doing all right.
Good. Well, today's episode, I may be more excited about this than most that we've done. Like, I was really excited about the Ahsoka ones way back when.
Yeah.
I was really excited once we finished going through all 6 movies because that was, 9 movies because that was a lot. In my head, there's only 6. And then, and today we are going to be doing our Star Wars wish list. So, our idea for this, because as most Star Wars fans are, most listeners can probably agree with this, the wish list for Star Wars is kind of like an 8-year-old at Christmas. Like it could go as long as you want it to go.
Yeah.
So we've narrowed it down to 3 categories. We're going to do one video game that we would like to see each, one TV show that we would like to see on Disney Plus, and then one movie or maybe a trilogy, if you will, maybe a spoiler for what I'm getting into. But video game, series, film, that's where we're going. So did you have a hard time coming up with this list?
A little bit. I honestly had a harder time coming up with a movie. I think because we know there's some movies coming down the pipe that look like they could be pretty cool. So, but no, that was probably the hardest one, but it was still a lot of fun to sit down, and it was hard to narrow it down to one per category. Because like you said, I mean, you could go on and on about all the stuff you'd love to see in Star Wars, but yeah, I think some of mine could be a possibility one day. I think one of mine is it'll absolutely never happen. Like I'm like 99% sure about that. So, but it was still fun to, oh yeah, absolutely. But it was fun to sit down and think about that and try to narrow it down to one per category.
The movie was the hardest for me too, because I think shows, it's pretty well defined, like what they're going to put into a show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of room they can explore, and most of the things we've wanted to see as a show have kind of happened. So I think they're pretty good with that. Video game wasn't too hard for me to narrow down because as far as Star Wars goes, there's only so much you can do with video games, and they've covered a lot of ground there. But movie was difficult, especially because the one I really want to see, I think, is already happening. So I had to come up with another one.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So we'll touch on that, though. So the way we're going to break through this or go through this is we are going to start with our video games, go into our Disney Plus series, and then our films or our movies. So, Kevin, you're the video game guy. Why don't you start off?
Yeah, I think I have a very specific wish for what I would like out of a video game. So, we've had some really good games lately, right? Like the Jedi games that EA's put out have been really fun. If you're into multiplayer and the big battles, like the Star Wars Battlefront 2 game is a lot of fun as well. And so, yeah, I mean, there's been some really cool stuff come out, but to me, like one thing that I feel like is missing, that it's been a really long time, is just a single player, linear, story driven first person shooter type game. Because, Battlefront 2 was first person, but it was really geared more towards the multiplayer side. I mean, you'd have to go back all the way to Republic Commando, right? Like that.
Yeah.
You can put in the Dark Forces games that are way back.
It's like N64, right? Like that's Super Nintendo.
They kind of transitioned to more of a like third person action game once Cal Katarn became a Jedi. And so I loved Republic Commando. One of the cool things about that game is it was really the first one to humanize the clones, right? This was before the Clone Wars, and you actually got to have these characters. And so kind of fell in love with that game. But I would love a first-person shooter set in the Clone Wars. Like you play as a captain, like paired up with a Jedi general, and you just play through these parts of the war. Because one of the cool things about the Clone Wars, it's just been expanded so much. Like it goes from in the original trilogy to just being a name, right? It's like it gets name dropped as the Clone Wars. We're like, oh yeah, sure, the Clone Wars. That makes total sense, right? And then, of course, we get the start of it in the prequels. We get to see the end of it in Revenge of the Sith, and then we get to see it a little bit throughout the Clone Wars. But even then, you're following specific people and specific events. So I feel like it's ripe now to just jump into some of these other conflicts and battlegrounds and things that would have happened during the Clone Wars. And man, how cool would it be to like fight along a Jedi general all the way up to Order 66? I feel like that would be a cool scenario you could set up, like that idea of betrayal. And anyway, so I think that could be a really cool storyline, a really cool, just narrative driven thing. And I'd love it if, this is where there's a little bit of a caveat, I'd love it if Respawn would make it. They're the guys that have made the Jedi Survivor games.
Okay, yeah.
Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor.
Yeah.
The guys that founded Respawn are the guys that started the company that made Call of Duty. And then they made Titanfall 2, which is one of the best first-person shooter story campaigns in the last decade. If you haven't played it, it's so cool. It's just really fast, frenetic combat. But I'd love for them to be in charge of it. Now, they're already working on a first-person shooter, which sounds like it might be a Mandalorian game.
Yeah, that's what they said a week or so ago, right?
And that sounds like it might be a little more open world, which I have no issues with that. I love a big open world, but I'm a sucker for a good story where they can control every aspect of it and just tell a really good narrative. So
yeah,
that's probably, I would love if there was a first-person shooter set in the Clone Wars that was just really story-driven, play as like a clone commando with a Jedi, and just through that whole arc of the Clone Wars would be really, really cool.
That would be awesome, and I've never actually thought of that, but if they did do that, it could go as far as like you could be the clone in one set of the story mode, you could be the Jedi in the other.
Yeah,
like you could almost make it to where it's replayable, like you do it one way and then you come back and you do it another. Or if it was even like a youngling, like you're or not a youngling, but a Padawan. So you're the Padawan experiencing all this as you go through the war. That would be pretty cool too.
It would be cool. And of course, I mean, it's obviously ripe for cameos, right? Like you come across the Bad Batch in a mission. You come across, any of the Jedi Masters that we know and love. It would be cool to just kind of jump across the different battlefields that we haven't seen and come across some of these characters all set within this just really kind of action-packed war setting that we know and we know a good bit about now, but I still feel like there's a lot you could jump into and tell with that.
That would be so cool. I would buy that game. That sounds awesome. So for mine, I don't know the developers and all that, so I just have an idea.
It's fair.
And honestly, this could go as my series or video game, but I feel like it's almost more likely if it were to be, it will not happen in live action. So it would either be animated or a video game. And so I would like to see Luke Skywalker immediately following Return of the Jedi and then building up his legend, say over like, I don't know how big you want to make the game, but like say you build it up to the point to where maybe Ben Solo's not with him yet. So just him without Ben Solo. Because I feel like at some point they'll explore an animated Luke and Ben Solo series, I think. So this one could just be like the however so many years leading up to that point, and you get to actually be Luke Skywalker, like doing all these crazy things, going on these side missions. I think that would be fun. You get a little taste of it in Battlefront 2, in that one level. And so I think that would be a great way to give us Jedi Master Luke, and you actually get to experience all of the coolness of that in a video game.
Yeah, that would be cool. Like just kind of playing through building his legend from Jedi Knight to Jedi Master. That would be a really cool arc, and you could probably do some really cool stuff within there, especially like you could throw in like just traveling and interacting with other Force users and different groups. And that could be a really cool premise. I would, that's another game I would buy. So.
The only issue with that is I think you're going to have some overlap with Luke on these TV shows now. Like he's going to be popping up in the Mandalorian Ahsoka verse, I believe, like with this Thrawn story. I think we're going to see him in that. So you would have to really like hone it into a time frame. But I think open world style, like the Jedi series, Fallen Order Survivor, where he can go around and do certain tasks. Like maybe he goes to a world that's still not like there's still an Imperial remnant there, so he's got to free them. Little things like that. It could just go on and on and on, and it's Luke Skywalker, so that would just be incredible.
Yeah, no, I think that would definitely work, and I think that would, I think there'd definitely be an audience for that. So,
oh, for sure. So, any other video game commentary you have?
No, I mean, I feel like they've, it was kind of a dry spell for a while in terms of Star Wars video games entertainment. You know, there wasn't a whole lot after, after LucasArts kind of got closed out and they shut them down. Which, I mean, I get it's part of a business and a merger, but man, I don't know why you shut them down. They'd made some really awesome games,
Good stuff.
From the Rogue Squadron games to the, like we mentioned, Republic. They put out some fun stuff. But yeah, since then there was kind of just a drought. But now they've contracted these things out. Disney's gone the licensed route, so they're letting these other companies and developers kind of work on them. So
yeah,
there's several things in the work. I mean, there's that.
The one that's coming out this year.
Yeah, so there's the Outlaws that Ubisoft's making coming out this year, which is supposed to be like a big open world, you're an outlaw type of deal.
Yeah.
There's that really interesting narrative one they've teased, the Eclipse one.
Where they keep they have like maybe had the best really video game trailer where he's hitting the drum.
Yeah. I mean, that's in the works. So there's a lot of cool stuff in the works. And I think it's, and now that they're kind of integrating it a lot into canon, like Cal Kestis is a super cool character, right? That everybody's kind of embraced and we love. So it's a good time for Star Wars video games. There's a lot on the table and a lot still coming down. So,
and they're using it as a way to tell canon stories, which is always good. The more avenues you can put into this, the better. So
agreed.
Moving from the video games, that was kind of the appetizer for this. Let's go to the TV shows. I don't know that the one that I want will ever happen, but I would think it would be very easy for them to pull off if it did.
Okay.
And that, I'll go ahead and go. That would be a Darth Vader series shortly after Revenge of the Sith. Could be immediately after. I don't care. Like, to bridge the gap. But I want to see Vader in the suit just being terrible. I mean, obviously, like
Vader being Vader, right?
Yeah, so we know by Kenobi he wants to find Obi-Wan. Like, that's a big deal. So I don't really want that story, but it could lead up to that, I suppose. But Vader, almost like in The Force Unleashed, you know how you start off the game where he's like hunting down the Jedi in that first level? I think that would be awesome just to see Vader finishing Order 66, maybe Vader starting to recruit the Inquisitors, things like that. It could be very Inquisitor and Vader heavy, but I just want like some bad guy stuff for a few seasons. It would be so easy to pull off because any tall dude could be in the suit. They do the voice, they just generate it now, so that's not a tough thing to do. And then every now and then you could pay Hayden for a mask off scene on occasion. It would be so easy. That's also how you get Natalie Portman back in Star Wars, by like him having visions and stuff like that.
That's true.
She's open to returning, and I don't really see how they get her back other than that. So I would love to see that. It would be very PG-13, I feel like, because Vader's just always going to be killing somebody.
Yeah, that would be an interesting time period to explore, because if you think about it, this is Vader at the peak of his rage, right? Like after this loss to Kenobi and losing Padme, like the amount of anger and rage that must be pent up inside of him that he's just about to go vent on this Jedi search. That would be intense. That would be a cool thing to see, because we know there's this great Jedi purge, right? We know that Order 66 is not the end of it. We know that he goes on. We see some of it with the Inquisitors, but we also know that he's personally seeking out and exterminating the Jedi. So that would be a cool period to explore. Just with, you could have different arcs where an arc is just seeking out this Jedi, right? And for a couple episodes, it's tracking this guy down. And finding whatever world they're on, and you could have a whole arc of him just hunting down rogue Jedi. That would be cool. I'd like that.
I have one hang up on it, and it's not a hang up for me. It's a hang up I think Disney would have. And how do they reconcile nothing good happening? You know what I mean? So they would have to, and really for Star Wars as a whole, because Star Wars doesn't do that, right? Like they don't just throw bad thing after bad thing. There's always something good mixed in as the overarching theme. So I don't know if you would have maybe some pun intended cracks in the armor, if you will, like you start having these Padme flashbacks or something. There would have to be some good things happening, or else I don't think it would actually happen. That would probably go against George's wish and plan for Star Wars. It would certainly go against what Disney does. So that would be the one hang up I would have, is how are they actually going to maybe add something positive to something that would have to be a big negative. I think when we get the Acolyte this summer, we're going to see how Disney tangos around that, and we'll see if that would be a possibility.
Yeah, that's true, because we're all expecting that to be a pretty dark one that doesn't end well. Yeah. So it will be interesting to see how they do balance that. I think you could put elements of, if Vader is hunting these people down, somehow these story events push more people into the rebellion or something, or create a stir, an uprising. I mean, you could probably tie that in somehow, but you'd have to. I mean, I'm sure there's an audience out there for it, and I don't think people would necessarily mind. But at the same time, you're right. Like within Star Wars, there's always that element of hope. Yeah. And so I do feel like you got to be careful with how you balance that. So that's a good point. I don't know. Yeah. Still love to see it. That's a good point. Personally,
I would prefer it just to be Vader being bad, but realistically, that couldn't happen.
Yeah, I think bringing up the Acolyte's a good point, because that's going to be an interesting new phase for this, because a lot of what we've seen so far has been pretty standard Star Wars in a good way. Yeah. Like not like boring, but it'll be interesting to see how they handle a focus on some darker stuff. So. Yeah.
What have you got?
So mine, okay. So we've talked about this before. I love space dogfights, right? Big space battles with the ships and the fighters. Return of the Jedi, just watching the battle over the moon of Endor was mind-boggling for me as a kid. And I was so pumped when we started to get this Rogue One movie that who knows at this point where that is. Like it's kind of gotten
the Rogue Squadron.
Burner. Yeah. Sorry, not Rogue One, Rogue Squadron. That's what I meant.
I think it's like forever gone, right?
It feels that way, right? I don't think they ever came out and said that, but it got pulled off the schedule. There's no news about it. And so bummed about that. But if I could get some sort of like X-Wing show, like a show just about a squadron of pilots and just all the things, like I would love that. Honestly, one of the things that really got me drawn into Star Wars. So I got into the books when I was younger. I was reading like the Young Jedi Knight books when I was like 11 or 12. And then I was looking for more Star Wars stuff because I loved it. And I come across the library and it's just a picture of an X-Wing blowing stuff up. So this is cool. So I got into the X-Wing novels, which are great. If you've never read them, obviously they're not canon or anything at this point, but they're just fun Star Wars. It kind of took me out of just this bubble of Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Princess Leia, and just like all these other great stories you can tell in the Star Wars universe. And so if I had it my way, it would be there'd be an adaptation of this book right here. I even pulled it out. Wraith Squadron.
Oh, I've never seen that before.
Pretty messed up. So it's a cool setup. Basically Rogue Squadron's kind of the front of the New Republic. They kind of get all the attention, but Wedge, who is in charge of Rogue Squadron, is kind of like, we need somebody to do some dirty work. And so he comes up with this idea of creating a unit that's more commando based, like they have commando on the ground type skills, but they're also pilots. But he wants like people that are washed out looking for a second chance. So it's like all these losers who have washed out and are just falling apart and have so many issues and just emotional trauma, and throws together this group. And it's such a cool group and story and character arc. So, man, if I ever got something like that where it's almost like I don't know, Guardians in the Galaxy and X-Wings.
Yeah.
It's a great premise. Those books. So that's after the Rogue Squadron. It's written by Aaron Alston.
Okay.
Probably some of my favorite books that were written in the Star Wars universe. But that's one of those things where it's totally a pipe dream. But if I ever got to see something like that, even if it's not exactly the same, just like a fighter squadron show would be incredible. Mm-hmm. I would love that.
No, that would be really cool, and that's one they could even almost like throw into a movie too, because that's what it was going to be. It was going to be a movie anyway. So I mean, just be like a Top Gun in space with some Rogue One elements to it, where it is kind of that ragtag group. That would be so fun to watch, and I feel like a lot of that stuff would just be CGI anyways.
Yeah,
right. Like
a lot of it would have to be for sure.
Yeah, so I don't even think that would be a movie that would take forever to throw together.
But I would prefer it as a show. I'd much rather, because the great part about it was also just the characters, right? And like it's I don't know that it would balance very well with Disney Plus. Disney Plus really kind of focuses on a really tight cast of characters, especially their live action stuff in shorter seasons, right? Like I feel like and I kind of wonder if at some point Disney's going to try something a little more longer form in terms of longer seasons with a larger cast, with a focus on different characters and different things, and more of an episodic approach where they tie in together overall. It would be interesting to see if Star Wars ever goes that route, because right now it's very contained, very focused. But I think there's a space for that, especially with something like an X-Wing show. You could just kind of have a larger picture and a smaller picture that kind of builds and carries on. So I don't know.
That would be fun.
I'd love it. But yeah, there's my suggestion. If you are interested in reading stuff, even if it's not canon, there's still some great stories out there. Pick up the X-Wing novels. Race Squadron's my favorite, but yeah.
No, that would be good. I would like to see that, especially because it would be pretty action based too. Like the complaints about Andor being slow. I don't think if you're following like a group of pilots, you could have some character building like you're saying, but eventually they're going to have to be blowing stuff up.
Oh, so for sure.
That's fun to watch.
Yeah.
So television shows, I do have one honorable mention. I don't want to go too far into it.
Okay.
But I would like to see, and maybe they're going to, do this at some point, maybe Tales of the Jedi or something, but I just want more Baylan Skoll in some shape, form, or fashion.
Yeah.
And so, like, an animated thing like that, but I didn't list that because I wouldn't be shocked if that didn't show up in a Tales of the Jedi or something, just to give us a little bit more. But, man, you just got to find a way to get more of him.
And I feel like they've got to know that, right? Like, I feel like at this point they see the appeal of the character. They see just that people love him. And so I feel like he's got to be coming somewhere down the pipe in something somewhere. So,
we've talked about that a bunch. We don't have to dig too far into it, but that would be so cool to see.
That would be. Yeah.
So for movies, do you want to start off?
I can. Yeah. So I had a harder time with the movie because there's already some big stuff coming out soon. It's pretty cool stuff. Like you got the Dawn of the Jedi thing, which we think is going to explore maybe the origins of the Jedi. Of course, we got the current state of affairs with the Mandoverse. We got that movie coming up, and then of course the Rey movie. And so it'll be interesting to see how those do. And so trying to figure out outside of some of those situations, like what would I really want to see? What would be really interesting? I think I'd really, really be interested in seeing the origins of the Sith. Because we spend so much time with the Sith, right? Like they are all throughout the movies, obviously. They're like the primary antagonist to the Jedi, but that wasn't always the case, right? Like if you go back and look at timelines, like the Jedi was like 25,000 BBY, right? Yeah. And then the origins of the Sith are only like 5,000. So there's this huge period of time where there's Jedi and no Sith. And kind of the very vague explanation is that there's just kind of some rogue Jedi that split off and start pursuing this other thing. And they become this Sith Empire, which at the time looks very different, right? There's no rule of two. It's like an empire.
Like Malachor and stuff, right?
I'd be fascinated to see that schism take place within the Jedi. Like what issues within the Jedi took place that caused this group to break off, to become what they became. Like, what did they find out there when they left that drove them to become this conquering force group, that desires to take over everything, right? To basically bring order through chaos, which is a really interesting mindset, right? And so I'd love to see how that started. I'd love a series of movies that starts there. We see the fracture, we see these groups split off, and what do they find? What do they see out there that causes them to create this Sith empire? I think that'd be cool. And that's something I personally would just be really interested in and would love to see the lore and just the how did that actually unfold.
That would be so awesome too, because when you said Sith Empire, my mind went straight to like large scale war. I mean, like thousands with sabers on either side. That would be such good action. I think you could obviously you could build trilogies and trilogies on that, because the number of characters and everything, that would be incredible to see.
Yeah, and we obviously have allusions to that type of thing, right? With the Jedi being at war with the Sith, and eventually they kind of go to this rule of two thing to stay hidden, because they're trying to function and survive after they essentially get wiped out, which is so it'd be cool to see for sure.
And you would see too, like you would get glimpses of some name dropped characters as well, right? Yeah. Like you would have some Sith, I feel like, that we would know. Because when did the rule of two start? Was that? It's not Bane, is it? That's not who started. Is it?
He did, but it was kind of after a lot of the war and stuff took place.
It'd be like his masters type deal.
Yeah. Is Exar Kun? Is he canon, or is he back in Legends still? I don't know. It's hard for me to keep up with what has and hasn't carried over.
Well, in episode 9, for all of its shortcomings on Exegol, they threw a lot of Sith stuff in there. Those statues and stuff that Palpatine had. So we would have to look that up. Someone in the comments, maybe if you know that, like what Sith statues were on Exegol in episode 9, because that would be interesting to know. Because I think that like dated way back as far as the Sith go. I don't think it was just Bane forward. I'm pretty sure it was way back there.
And I think Korriban too is a planet that's become canon, is kind of like a founding place for the Sith.
I was saying Malachor. It's Korriban is what it is.
Yeah, where they built their temples and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I guess they spread after that. I don't know if Exegol I guess that would come after, since that was kind of like the founding of the Sith. But like, it would be it'd be interesting to see. I don't know how much that stuff is carried over.
Korriban is on Knights of the Old Republic, is where you actually get to go there.
Yeah, that's true. Yep.
No, that would be super cool to see. So mine is pretty similar to yours, just a skip, jump, and leap forward a few thousand years. I would like a trilogy. So I said a movie, but this is going to be a story of movies.
That's fair.
I would like Plagueis up to episode 1. So I don't need a ton of Plagueis backstory. I'm fine. Like the Plagueis novel, I think, is my favorite Star Wars book. I read it last December. And so I would like, for sure, him coming across Palpatine at some point, maybe canonize that. It doesn't have to be identical to the book, but if it was, the book does a pretty good job with it. And leading up to Palpatine, starting his little corruptive deal with his backroom Sith stuff while running the Republic and all that, or getting himself set up to run the Republic. The book does an excellent job at that, exploring some of Plagueis, the whole immortality thing. That would be cool. And then almost if it led up to like maybe the last scene of this trilogy was Palpatine and Plagueis discussing what they're going to do on Naboo, like what the plan is there. And then you could go from there to episode 1. And it would, I know like, we're done with the Skywalker saga, and we can say it starts with episode 1. But if you want to look at it as the Palpatine story, which we joke about, if you started with this, it would play right in. It would probably make the story even better.
Yeah, that would be interesting. It would be cool to look at too, because I feel like Plagueis, seems, and I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about all the Sith that came before him, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, it seems like he's kind of represents a shift in the Sith philosophy of like, we can't, like, this brute force thing of just trying to amass power and conquer isn't working. You know, he kind of switches gears to this weird combination of the force and science and experiments, trying to grasp eternal life.
Yeah.
Like, he's not out there trying to conquer the galaxy instantaneously, right? Like, he's
Long
interested
game.
in other things, which is interesting to me. So it would be interesting to see like if there is a shift in like the Sith philosophy there, and like, hey, we have to do this a different way, which kind of works out, right? Like, if temporarily it works. They kind of managed to take over the galaxy for a little while through Palpatine. So that would be really interesting, especially because that's a name that's become bigger and more important within the lore, and there's material coming out about it. It would be cool to see a larger picture really expand on his character, and of course his interaction with Palpatine. That would be interesting.
Right.
So that would be good.
I was gonna say it could even touch on like the Force, you know, producing Anakin as well. Like when there starts to be that shift, it could even almost be like, you know, I felt a tremor or something like that. You know what I mean? Just like a little hint here and there. It could tie in together really well. I think that would be pretty cool. Seeing Darth Tenebris, which is Plagueis' master. If you've ever seen like a picture hit, you know, I forget the species, but it's some alien that we've seen, like I want to say in the cantina or something like that. Or it's one of those that play the flute things, right?
Oh,
in that way.
Bith.
Yeah, Bith. So that's what Tenebris is. So seeing like a Sith Bith would be pretty.
Sith Bith.
A Sith. Yeah. That would be funny to see, I think, because you don't picture that as like a menacing figure at all. Which I did have one thought. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just being dumb. I was going to wonder if Disney has like a vault of Darth names. Like,
I'm sure.
All the Darth names I find are interesting. I wonder where they come up with them all.
Yeah, well, random George thought. Just used other languages as plays on words for his, right? Like, oh, this means this. So, yeah.
And some of them are not very original. Darth Sidious, right? Like,
he's bad. Darth Vader, father.
Bad guy.
Well, so my thought was just what you were saying, like, they did take over the galaxy for a while. This is a complete tangent, but how crazy is it that this whole Sith line for 5,000 years, the rule of two, like they just have this slow buildup, and their victory parade only lasts like 23 years. Like they do all this. It's not
this
even
master plan in the works. To stay in the shadows and eventually take over, and it works.
For 2 decades,
for not very long. Yeah, that's a bit of a bummer.
It really is, and that's the first time I've thought about this. Is like they get beat by a ragtag group of rebels that had like no money and a kid who learned he had the Force 3 years prior. I mean, it's not very promising for their empire.
Yeah, I'm sure when Rey kills Palpatine, there's a lot of dead Sith Lords, just rolling their eyes. Like, really?
One of our own got us.
Yeah. That's funny.
And the Palpatine saga. So that was a lot of fun. I mean, anytime you just start talking about a wish list, I think that's a great time because you get to be creative and really think of the stories you've got and what that could lead you to. So that was a good time. Audience, drop in the comments what your wish list is. I would definitely love to see what all creative Star Wars people can come up with. Video games, show, movies, whatever it is. Let us know. As for next week's episode, do you have anything in mind before I throw something out there?
We had talked about something last week. What was it? I can't remember.
Well, we had talked about ranking like Jedi or Sith Lords, and I think that's just going to be hard.
Different now?
Yeah, because you were right when you said like that would take a while, like, and you'd have to really narrow it down. So
a lot of criteria establishment for that too. So.
Yeah. So do you have anything you would like to rank before I throw something out there?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. So
you're the brains behind this operation. So
okay, I'm thinking lightsaber duels from the 9 films.
Okay.
There's not there's only like 9 of them, so that's not
like major duels.
Yeah. So
that'd be good. I think that would be easy to rank
fun.
Actually.
It would be tier ranking, not like a one through whatever, just a tier ranking. And I'll determine, like, Revenge of the Sith has quite a few lightsaber duels, and so we'll have to like do some criteria, like major lightsaber duels. I think so. That's what we'll do next week. We will tier rank episode 1 through 9 lightsaber duels. So we're not going to do like Ahsoka or anything like that. Those probably wouldn't rank very high anyways. I mean, the choreography is not the same. So that's what we'll do next week. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. We will catch you guys next week.